Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. I have Josh Dech on with us today, and I'm so excited to talk about the gut and fertility. Thank you, Josh, for joining me.
Amy, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm very much looking forward to diving into this with you.
I'd love to share with our listeners a little bit more about you. You're an ex-paramedic and holistic nutritionist specializing in Crohn's and colitis and other gut-related issues. You've been recruited to the Priority Health Academy as a medical lecturer, helping educate doctors on the holistic approach to gut health. And you're also the host of ReversABLE, a top podcast that addresses gut health. Welcome again, Josh.
Pleasure, Amy. Quite the introduction, but that basically covers the gist. We can go now. We can leave.
I'm excited to talk about this because my practice is all about the holistic approach to fertility, and the gut has everything to do with that. Can you explain, though, for our listeners, what does gut health mean and why is it so important for overall well-being?
So when we're talking about the gut, we have to understand, I often make the argument that our guts are as important as our very own DNA. The reason I say that, if we even look at how your gut influences everything, number one, you have more gut bacteria than actual DNA. In fact, you got 23,000 genomes in your entire genetic code, give or take, depends on who you ask. You have about 3 million different pieces of genetic material inside of your gut bacteria, with trillions, upwards of 100 trillion microbes. Arguments have been made for 2-to-1 microbes that outnumber your own human cells to 10-to-1. It's a huge shift of how much we can have, but either way, there's more of them than there are of us. They influence every aspect of your genes. They influence your mood, how social you feel like being in a given day, your brain chemistry, mental illness, fertility, nutrient absorption, medical status. In fact, our guts are even connected to 14 out of 15 of the leading causes of death in North America. And so we talk about what is gut health. I'd argue, Amy, that it is everything because it really does encompass everything.
Wow. So it could be your enemy or it can be your best friend. So how does it impact fertility? And what are the key connections between the two?
Well, the best way I can explain it is this. Your body has a pecking order of priority where it will not take on extra functions beyond survival functions. If you are running, let's go back to basic fight and flight, right? Let's go back to the old adage of running from a bear or a saber-toothed tiger. If you are running and fleeing for your life, your body is not hungry. You are literally in the opposite. You're not in rest digest where you can digest and break down food. You're in fight in flight. It shuts down the non-essential digestion for right now, shunting resources to the what we need right now to survive. When you have gut issues and you're ill, every aspect of your body, your health and wellness is compromised. That's number one. And so number two, your body is not going to be as inclined to divert extra resources. I mean, growing a baby, producing healthy sperm, these are very nutrient greedy aspects of the human body and development. And so if you don't have any to spare because your body is using it all to try to heal these wounds, which are much more important for survival in life than having a baby, we're already, number one, going to be deficient in our ability biochemically, biologically, or nutritionally speaking to have this baby. Number two, if you're not breaking down, digesting, and absorbing properly, you're already going to be in the deficit for your resource, your banks, we'll say, so to speak. So you're going to be depleted. Then number three, reproductive organs, especially female reproductive organs, lay on top of the bowels. And so there's a huge connection between things like endometriosis, PCOS, and other reproductive issues and gut health issues, because these inflammatory processes, they are transient. They will pass from organ to organ because they create these leaks, they create these processes. So you got deficiencies, you got inflammation, and you have transient inflammation from one organ set to another, leading to inflammation, which again makes you not as able to have a baby, to even become pregnant, let alone carry a baby to full term.
So if someone's experiencing fertility challenges, what can they do to improve their gut health and in turn boost their chances of conception?
I think oftentimes we're looking for the silver bullet. We're looking for this supplement or this thing that I can do, this thing that I can take to magically fix all my gut issues. But the reality is a lot of us end up trading in medication for what I call plant-based medication. We end up taking ourselves away from pharmaceuticals, which are designed to mask the symptoms. They do not cure anything. They just cover the symptom of dysfunction. That's what symptoms are. It's your body trying to communicate to you in a language we call symptomatology. It says something's wrong, something is broken, something's not working, please help. And this is the word I can use, which is bloating, psoriasis, eczema, sleeplessness, teeth grinding. These are the words I can tell you, please help. And we don't know how to listen. So we kind of just ignore it. And we think the symptoms are the problems. We take medication to cover that symptom, but really there's a root that's leading to the problem. And so we jump on a bunch of supplements to try to manage our gut symptoms. Well, now it's plant-based medication. What we need to look at to improve our gut, and this is a whole conversation, but I'd love to go whichever way, Amy, you feel is best suited here. We have to identify the root cause, number one. That way, when you're taking a supplement, can you go, this is what I'm taking it for. Here's the thing I'm trying to combat. Here is the start, middle, and end goal for this supplement, what I expect it to achieve. And then here's the next phase as we recycle this start, mid goal, end goal of our supplementation to reach milestones to recovery. But if you come in and go, well, I'm really inflamed. Well, here's some curcumin or some dragon's blood or Qingdai or whatever supplements you're using, omegas and 99 things under the sun, aloe and slippery elm. Now you're on plant-based medication because you're managing inflammation by managing your symptoms. So we have to listen to the body and what it's telling us in the words of symptomatology to be able to identify the root cause of your gut issues to then remove the problem.
Well, one of the most common questions I get from my patients is, what can I eat? Is there anything I should avoid? How would you answer that question as far as like top foods or dietary practices that would be recommended for improving gut health, especially for those trying to conceive?
Yeah, when we're looking at this, most of us need to look at what we can remove. If we're just looking to add in good foods, add in probiotic foods, add in easily digested foods, we don't really consider that we need to be removing things from our life. Now, it can be toxins in the way of toxic foods. It can be perfumes and chemicals or scents and odors. It can be high VOC, what we call volatile organic compound paints and carpets and bed sheets covered in fire retardants. These might be the toxins you need to remove. But simply for diet, I say this, if your great, 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 great grandmother would not recognize it as an edible food, don't eat it. Because 98% of the foods we have today never existed 100 years ago, neither did 98% of the diseases. So it's as simple as going back to what grows on a tree, on a bush, in the ground, what flies, what swims. We can look at the things that, grow naturally in nature that we can consume.
So, over 20 years ago, leaky gut wasn't a thing. I mean, I was never taught it in medical school. For listeners out there who don't know what leaky gut is, can you explain it in simple terms?
I absolutely can. I love a good analogy. So when we look at leaks in the gut, if you picture your gut cells, they're all held together, kind of like stitches in a quilt. You have picture all these squares stitched together. Your small intestine has a very permeable membrane. If you think of this like wearing a sock in a shoe, that sock protects your foot from getting blistered inside the shoe. You have this very permeable sock type membrane inside your small intestine, a slightly thicker one in your large intestine. When we typically see leaky gut, it's primarily going to be small intestine. So that very thin permeable membrane, it's one cell thick. What happens, if you picture it sort of like squares on an Afghan, what happens is these squares actually spread apart. These stitches hold them together. They're called gap junctions. When you're inflamed, they spread. And so normally food, nutrients, byproducts, things you digest actually pass through the cell membrane into the blood, your lymphatic system, and they circulate around the body. When you're inflamed, those cells spread apart, the stitches start to tear. And now instead of going through the membrane like they're supposed to, through checks and balances like airport border security, they just go right through the cracks unchecked. And what happens is they start wreaking havoc inside of the body. And so you get big pieces of chicken that shouldn't have been there. Now, suddenly your immune system triggers, says, whoa, that's a piece of chicken, not a tiny amino acid in our blood. That's actual chicken. That shouldn't be in here. Sends a red flag down. Your immune system goes, whoa, what are you? And now red alerts on. Every time you eat chicken or poultry, even turkey, an identifiable protein, you have an immune reaction to it. And now you have a list of food sensitivities, which makes your inflammation higher, which makes the leak in the gut bigger. Then your body produces a protein called zonulin, which is also a leaky protein. It makes the leaks even bigger. It's a defense mechanism. It's trying to clean things out, but it actually makes the leaks worse. And now instead of things leaking out of the gut, or things can leak both ways rather, we're leaking bigger things now into the bloodstream, which causes a higher immune response. And now you have inflammation moving all around the superhighway, which is your blood or your lymphatics. And now you have mental health issues, anxiety, depression, insomnia, maybe schizophrenia, bipolar, maybe you have joint issues, arthritis or skin, psoriasis, acne, eczema. all these byproducts that shouldn't be getting out because your gut, the stitches in between, opened up. Now things pass through, they circulate everywhere, and now you have other illnesses, food sensitivities, allergies, immune issues piling on top of each other. And that's essentially leaky gut, which again, leaky gut is a good thing, but most of us have it in a bad way.
Got it. Those are excellent analogies. I don't think I could ever cite that as well as you, but I appreciate
I've
that
been
you explained.
practicing a long time.
So, how can someone maintain their long-term gut health, particularly for those who have chronic conditions like Crohn's or IBD, who are also thinking about fertility in the future?
My best advice, if you know you have a bowel disease and you know that there is a route to fix it, because right now, before this episode, you didn't know there was any way it could be fixed. But we're telling you 100% it can be fixed almost every case in just a matter of time. I've had people come into our practice say, I'm looking at it. We also want to get pregnant. We're in the middle of IVF and they want to rush the process. And I get it. Like, it's so important. This cornerstone of your life, this next chapter you and your partner want to take to have a baby. But I think it's really important we recognize the risk. Number one, miscarriage. Number two, lack of being able to get pregnant, so infertility in the first place. But number three, if that baby's born, there is an extremely high likelihood it will develop GI issues because of what it started with. People who have these issues have a responsibility that you know better to make a better decision, to try to find some way to reduce or mitigate the issues that you're dealing with beforehand, where possible, in order to give your baby the best fighting chance at having a healthy, long life rather than being born with disease early on. So we have to take steps now in this very poison toxic world to do what we can as responsible, autonomous adults to make a responsible, non-emotional decision and go, here's what we need to do first.
Absolutely. You have to clean your house before the very important guest, the most important guest of your life, comes in. And you aren't just what you eat, you are what your mother ate too. So we have to remember that. And people just need to learn more about healthy eating, lifestyle changes that they need to make pre pregnancy, especially because of the way that we're being treated right now. And that's not very well with how the world is poisoning us. Not to sound too extreme, but it's the truth.
No, I mean, that's the truth. Everything is poison, like tap water. It's full of fluoride, which we know is a neurotoxin. There's chemicals, billions of chemicals. You got 300 out of 350 million Americans taking prescription drugs, give or take. And
Mhm.
all that gets out, it gets into the water supply. So there's
Mhm.
pharmaceuticals in there and antipsychotics and birth control and hormones. And we've 5x'd our cases of bowel disease. And so we're seeing this remarkable climb. And through the work of Justin Sonnenberg, we also know that your microbiome is generational. We can actually see it passed on. So your great great grandmother, chemicals were not introduced. Great grandma, chemicals were. Got down to grandma, to your mother, to you, to your kids. You can see the progression of gut issues and diseases spiking. If you look at the global burden of disease, you can Google global burden of disease 1950 to 2020. You can actually see a 45-degree angle as diseases increase because we're passing down this generational dysbiosis. But we have an opportunity right now, knowing what we know, to start correcting that, to give our future generations healthier guts right off the get-go.
You're seeing increased incidence of gut issues. I'm seeing increased incidence of PCOS and endometriosis. Is there anything else you'd like to add for our listeners to know?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can say here, Amy, we have to keep to the ideology that diseases are not innate to your DNA. They're not just part of you. They're not inevitable because you're human, which I know is a very frustrating situation, especially if you've got a diagnosis like Crohn's or colitis. You're somebody who was previously perfectly healthy. There's a small percentage who had issues their entire life. And I describe it in two ways. Either one, it's like wearing a pair of shoes without socks. And that heel rubs and gets red and blisters and bleeds, and it breaks down over many years until it becomes bowel disease. After all, 17% or so of people with Crohn's or colitis had a previous diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome. So it's up there somewhere. And 70% of North Americans have gut issues that may not yet be diagnosed as IBS. So there's this huge progressive wear and tear. On the other hand, you went to bed healthy, you woke up over a few short days, weeks, or months, and now you're sick. And you go to your doctor to go, yep, it's genetic. It just turned on one day. But innately, it doesn't make sense. The math doesn't add up. There has to be an explanation to this. And I want to encourage you, diseases are not innate to your biology. They're not part of your DNA. They're not part of being human. Your body has hundreds, 200 plus defense mechanisms, checks and balances in your immune system, and things to prevent your body from attacking itself. There are literally cells designed to attack cells that attack you. So, how did you just wake up one day with an autoimmune disease? We don't believe that you did. Picture your body like a glass of water. As that glass begins to fill, you start to feel some symptoms. When it overflows, you have enough diseases now to fit what's called diagnostic criteria. You go to the doctor, they check your symptoms, they do some blood, do some scopes, go, yep, you have this disease. So we have to ask ourselves, what filled the glass in the first place? Number one. Number two, why isn't it draining out the bottom like it should be? It should be emptying. Number three, what got wet? What other parts of the body have been damaged now because of this? When we can answer all these questions, we can get the root of your disease and it can be reversed. Crohn's and colitis, not this random autoimmune genetic condition, very fixable, very reversible, sometimes in just a couple of matter of weeks and months. On the other hand, whatever gut issue you're dealing with, there's a root cause, and they're unfortunately rarely DIY. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah. So, how can my patients work with you? Where can they find you?
I'll give you two different places and then a summary for that one. There's a podcast that I have, like you mentioned, called ReversABLE. That's ReversABLE, the ultimate gut health podcast. And then there is another podcast I made dedicated to Crohn's and colitis. It's called Reversing Crohn's and Colitis Naturally. And it's all about IBD. And so if you want to look those up, you can check them on whatever app you're listening to, or of course, go to gutsolution.ca. That's all singular, .ca for Canada, gutsolution.ca. We've got clients in 30, 40 different countries. We're all over the place. There's no limitations or restrictions. You can find the podcast at gutsolution.ca. You can get help. Whatever you need can all be found there.
And we'll have all the links in our show notes as well on my website. Well, Josh, thank you again for teaching us so much about our bodies, our gut health, and for these amazing analogies. Even if you don't have a gut problem, I think learning about how you perceive our bodies and disease can only help someone live their healthiest life ever. Thank you again, Josh.
It's been a pleasure, Amy. Thank you so much.